Hi, everybody. It's lawyer Autumn Webb Boyd here. I am taking a break from attending Heather Hubbard's virtual, not conference, retreat, summer camp, and joining you for today's episode of the Legal Roadmap podcast and our Facebook Live show, which is going to be for my copywriter friends. So if you do anything with words, if you are writing sales emails, if you are doing website copy, if you are doing sales pages, about pages, anything, if you are a magician with words, you are a copywriter, today's episode is for you. So my guess is you might have been kind of working a freelance life, maybe side hustling, but you are starting to get busier. You are seeing that things are picking up. If your business is anything like mine, despite this pandemic, the online business world is booming. So I hope that's true for you. And if you're finding that, you're ready to start building a real business, building your empire. So your emails, your funnels, your sales pages are selling like hotcakes, and you have decided to go all in and start building a business. But here's the thing, you may not be prepared for what comes with building that real business. So you may not have the answers to the questions that come with selling and delivering your creative services at a higher level. So I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of what we're going to talk about today. Maybe you want to send your potential clients a really solid contract that helps you close the deal. So it's very professional, very top notch, but that also makes it really clear what we are both expected to do for each other, what our schedule is, making sure that you're on the same page from day one. You also might be worried about clearly communicating to your clients who owns what in the work that you're doing together. Copywriting is very collaborative. It's not like, they just give you a topic and you go write whatever you want. It's often you go through revisions, you're working together, maybe they're giving ideas, maybe you're brainstorming. So who owns that at the end of the day? What happens if a client is not happy and wants to fire you, or if they are a nightmare client and you want to fire them? How does that work? You may not be sure if you have all the right policies in place and the terms on your website that are legally required. You want to make sure that's all legal. And you may be thinking, well, I'm getting busier. When the time comes to hire someone to help you, how can you make sure that you've got a good working relationship, and also that, just like we talked about with your clients, that you're really clear on who owns the work that contractor or employee eventually is doing for you or for your clients? That can get really sticky. So we are going to drill down into all of those things for my copywriter friends. And if you're listening and maybe you are not a copywriter, maybe you are a web designer, you're a different kind of creative service providers, you're a graphic designer, don't worry. We have already had an episode for my graphic design branding friends. That is episode 147. So go check that out of the Legal Roadmap podcast if you haven't already. And we have upcoming episodes in a couple weeks if you're a web designer. So don't worry, we will have you covered. And I will give you a sneak preview. Next week's episode of the podcast is going to be my interview with copywriter extraordinaire. She is a queen, Ashlyn Carter. You may know of her through her business, Ashlyn Writes. She works with some of the biggest names in online business, and she let me ask a ton of questions about how she's built her business, how she runs her business, and some legal issues that have come up along the way. She was really open and transparent. So you have that to look forward to. It's kind of a nice bookend to this episode, which is more about, for you copywriters, what do you need to be prepared for legally? So the first thing that we often think about, I want to kind of think through the client journey of working with you as a copywriter. So usually you'll get an inquiry, maybe someone needs help. Ashlyn and I actually talked about, I tried to hire her a couple years ago. The timing wasn't quite right with her schedule and what I needed. But so that's how it often starts. A client says, I need a sales funnel, or I have a launch coming up. I need a sales page. And so they have a specific project in mind that they want you to help them with. So often you are going to respond to that with some sort of proposal. That may be something formal. It may be you just get on the phone and outline your pricing. But a lot of times, especially if you want to appear very professional, you want to show up like you really know what you're doing and you're going to do a great job for the client, you may want to send them a project proposal. So that is an option. It's not required legally, but here's the thing. If you are using a project proposal, I want you to make sure that you're doing it the right way. And here's what I mean. Sometimes when I see project proposals, we are often at my law firm here at the AWB firm, we are often called in when something goes wrong. And then, we maybe didn't create the documents on the front end, but we're kind of trying to untangle everything on the back end. And so sometimes we see these proposals that are a bit of a mess. Maybe they had 5 different options of the different packages. Maybe one option has just a sales page. One option has a whole email sequence and the sales page. Maybe you've also got some additional website pages that you're going to work on as part of the package. It can be kind of pick and choose. And so what I don't like to see when we've had an issue come up is that it's not clear what anybody agreed that they were really going to do, because the proposal had a bunch of options and then you've just asked them to, sign here to agree. And maybe there's a couple terms and conditions stapled to the back of the proposal. What I really like, if we're using a proposal, is to have very clear outlines of the options, and that does not just magically turn into the contract. I know a lot of us want to kind of skip this step, and if we can just have one thing, then let's just have one document. We don't need a proposal and a contract. I get why that is appealing, but I want to caution you, it can kind of come back and kick you, because if I or somebody else like me is looking at a contract and I can't figure out, because there were so many different options, so many things left open, what you were even agreeing to, that's not really helpful. When we think about what we want a contract to do, we really want it to be very clear. We want it to set expectations for everyone. We want it to protect both sides. We want it to be even-handed, at least in my opinion. I'm only one lawyer, and that reminds me, I forgot my standard disclaimer, which is I am a lawyer. This is not legal advice. Please take it just as information. If you have questions about your business or anything we're talking about, make sure you consult with your own lawyer, whether that's us at our law firm or someone else. All right, so here is what I like to see in a project proposal. I've told you all the stuff I don't want to see. I like to see some clear options, and then I like to see, after you and the client have discussed the proposal, that then you have a contract. Maybe if it's clear and you only have certain packages that you do, you could allow the client to just, circle or check a box by the package they want, and then that can become the contract. But if there's any wiggle room, if there's any chance that they choose one thing from project or package A and 2 things from package B, and they want to make their own, choose your own adventure, I want to have a separate contract where it's really clear what you're actually agreeing to do. But ideally, your proposal and your contract should work hand in hand. So you would send the proposal, and that's really, frankly, kind of a marketing and sales piece. It's not really a legal piece. So I personally, this is just my preference, prefer not to have a lot of legal terms in the proposal, because you haven't agreed on what you're going to do yet. This is just kind of some options. When you make an agreement, that's when we put that into the contract. Now, of course, since they can work hand in hand, your contract can refer back to the proposal and say, we are agreeing to do all of the things in package A in the proposal. Or if, like I said, they've kind of chosen their own adventure, you may just want to kind of not refer to the proposal at all and just list out in your client agreement what you're going to do. So that's my biggest thing with the proposal. We don't want it to be muddy or unclear. All right, so we've talked about the proposal. The next step, hopefully the client says, yes, you have agreed on what you're going to do. Maybe you've had some emails back and forth. Maybe you've had a phone call. Now it's time to get everything really solid into a clear client contract. And for copywriters, this is really your most essential, most important legal agreement, legal protection really for your whole business. If you don't do anything else that you hear me talk about today, I want you to take a look at your client agreement. And if you don't have one, don't worry. We have a fill in the blank template in our contract store. We'll link to that in the show notes. You can find that along with all of our contract templates at awbfirm.com. That's our website. Excuse me. And so if you don't have a contract, I would highly recommend using that template. If you do have a contract, I want you to read through it while I talk through some of these really essential protections that you want to make sure are covered. And if you find that they're not covered, you've got a couple choices. You can work with a lawyer to make sure that your agreement is custom, built just to fit your business, or it may be easier to just go get a template and start from that, because you know that if you're working with one of our templates, at least, you know that it's got all of the essential terms, that we haven't left anything out. So let's talk about some of the things that are really important. And these are also, I should mention, these are things you should be talking about with your potential clients during the sales process. So you should be going over these so there's no misunderstandings. There shouldn't be any surprises when they actually receive the contract and read through it. It should be all the same things that you've been talking about as you're kind of onboarding them, getting them ready to work with you, as you're telling them about your process, how you work with people. So the first thing we've already talked about, what are you going to do? What are the deliverables? And I want you to be really clear about this. We already talked about, is it a 5 email sequence? Is it an about page and 2 services pages? Is it 5 sales pages? Whatever you're going to do, especially if there are some word limits involved, like I will only write 1,000 words, or I will write up to 5,000 words, or I will write 4 300-word emails, whatever. If that's something you care about, put it in your contract. We want to be really, really, really clear. The second thing to think about is schedule. So often, if you're like me, when I tried to hire Ashlyn, your potential client probably has some sort of schedule. Maybe they've got a launch that's on the books. Maybe they've got a promotion coming up, or they're partnering with someone else. We see a lot of affiliate promotions these days. So maybe someone else is launching and they're part of that. So they don't really have any flexibility on the timeline. If there is a schedule, you need to include it in the contract so everyone is on the same page. And that's especially important if, let's say, the launch is on September 15th. I'm just making this up. Maybe the launch is on September 15th, but they really need everything ready to go live on August 15th so that then they have time to get it all loaded on the website, get their Facebook ads running, or whatever other kind of promotion they're planning to do. Any kind of deadline like that, you should be talking about with the client, and you should be putting it into your agreement. That's also true if you, as the service provider, need their information by a certain date in order to hit the deadline. So let's say you have a standard 2-week turnaround. Because as I mentioned, this is collaborative. You're not just creating these things from the thin air. If you're helping someone sell a course, you need to know what the course is about. You need to have the assets. You need to maybe you want to see the course, maybe you want to see behind the scenes so that you get a feel for it, or what the promises are, who it's being targeted to. There's information you will need from your client. So if you have a deadline you need to hit for that in order to hit the rest of the deadlines, let's include that in the contract. All right, payment. Of course, we want to know when they need to pay, what they need to pay. If you've got a payment schedule, if you've got deposits, any of that kind of stuff needs to go in the contract. We all forget. We are all busy, and even the best client in the world is probably not going to remember unless you remind them. But let's go ahead and put it in the contract, and then if they're a little late, you can refer back to the contract, and again, everyone is on the same page. All right, I already mentioned that you may need things from the client. So in addition to talking about that as a scheduling matter, I really think it's important that you put in your contract how essential it is that the client gets you what you need, and even maybe gives you the opportunity to put the project on pause, or have penalties, monetary penalties, or time penalties, or upcharges if the client is slow getting you what you need. Because my guess is, if you're like most copywriters, you have a limited amount of bandwidth. Even if you're running a copywriting agency like Ashlyn is, you've only got so many people with so much time and energy. So you're probably kind of blocking off on your schedule for specific clients' projects. And so if the client doesn't get you what you need and you can't get it done in that block, your next block of time is probably full with another client. So it's important that the client knows upfront that they've got to hit these deadlines, or there could be consequences that may mean either they don't get what they need, or that you just kind of put the project on pause. And that also might be not just information in the beginning, but if you send them maybe drafts and you need them to review them or give you feedback, that could also be things you need from the client to do your job. So you want to think about that. Do you require the client to sign off? Do you say that after a certain amount of time, you just kind of assume the client has agreed if you haven't heard from them and you move forward? But having some sort of teeth in your contract for the client that ghosts you or just is always super slow to respond. I like to call this a pause clause. You may have heard about that. Very, very popular with creative services clients. You hope you never have to use it, but it's nice to have if you need it. Or you can threaten to use it. Maybe you won't actually have to use it. Maybe that's just the threat of using it is enough to kind of get people moving. All right, I already mentioned that you may have in your agreement that you will only do a certain number of revisions. There may be some back and forth. So if you do have a limit on the number of rounds of revisions, this is something my friend Val Geisler taught me. She's an excellent copywriter as well. And this is something we actually built into our contracts here at the AWB firm. We used to do certain projects we still do some at a flat rate, but we used to do contract drafting at a flat rate. And so to keep it from going to like version 17 at that flat rate, when I had estimated, a certain amount of time and a certain price based on a certain amount of work, we include that, this price includes a certain number of revisions. If it goes above that, what happens? Is it an extra fee? Then we go hourly? What does that look like? It's better to think of these things on the front end because I will tell you they will come up. It's not an if, it is a when. What happens if either of you need to cancel? Now, I will tell you, this is the thing I see left out of contracts entirely more than anything else. And whenever I have a sticky client issue come up, if someone comes to us and they either need to fire a client or a client is trying to fire them, or, just whenever there's these sticky client issues, that's the first place I go in the contract. What does the termination clause say? Or what does the cancellation clause say? And a lot of times it's just not there. So it's really helpful to think through that on the front end. What happens if either of you either have to cancel or want to fire the other? For good, bad, no reason at all. We need to have that in the contract so that if and when that comes up, there's a clear way that everybody handles it in a way that, doesn't leave anybody feeling like they got taken advantage of. It's very clear, protects everybody. All right, I already mentioned it's really super important when you are doing this kind of collaborative work to make sure we know who owns the rights to all of this wonderful work that you're creating together. Under our copyright law in the United States, when you hire a contractor for your business, so if a business hires you as a copywriter, it may be surprising that you as the copywriter actually own all the rights in whatever you're creating, even if you're getting instructions from the person who's hiring you, even though they're paying you for it, even though maybe you're working on some of it together, you own all of the work all of the copyrights in the work that you're doing. And most businesses don't really want that to be the way it works. So it's important that you acknowledge that and that you have a term in your agreement. There's kind of lots of different ways you can do it, but the two most common are either the copywriter maintains the rights and you just give the client a license. So that's basically giving them permission to do certain things with the work. Or probably more common with copywriting, because this is not like a photograph you're going to do something else with. Like if you've written launch copy for someone, you can't really do anything else with it. So what's more common is the business owner owns the copyrights. But I want to mention this can get kind of tricky, and you may have heard the term work for hire thrown around if you're in a creative industry. What that means is there's a provision under the copyright law where it kind of flips around what we just talked about with the contractor owning all of their work. Work for hire means if you're an employee, then the employer automatically owns anything that you've created as part of the scope of your employment. So that means if I work for a copywriting agency, the copywriting agency owns all of my work because I'm an employee. That's how things work. You can also put it into a contract. So for certain things, you can say, we all agree that this is going to be a work for hire. And that means from the moment it's created, there's not really ever a transfer. It's not like, I'm just holding up my cup, like we're transferring a cup from one person to the other person. It's like from the moment it's created, it's owned by the person who is the work for hire owner. The company, the business that's hired you is actually considered the author under work for hire. And so I don't love that term in a contract like this, what we're talking about if someone's hiring you as a copywriter, because what I have found is that owning the rights to your work is leverage. So let's say your client decides not to pay you, or you get into a fight, they're not happy with your work, you think it's great, you're just in a dispute and they want to fire you, but maybe they want you to refund their money. If you, as the copywriter in your contract, have a term that says you own all of the rights until you're paid in full, and then at that point, all the rights transfer to the client, that gives you leverage. If you have a work for hire term where the business owns all the rights right from day one, you don't have that leverage because they already own everything, whether they pay you or not. So I hope that is an example of how this can get really tricky. It's important to think through it. It's important to talk about it with your clients. There are some clients that insist on work for hire provisions. You can decide whether you want to work with them or not. Maybe if it's someone you really trust, you've worked with them a lot, or you require, full payment before you start. These are all things to think about. But making sure that you're really clear on who owns the rights to the work that you're doing, super, super important. All right, I've got two more things that I'm going to talk about that can come up with your client agreement. We want to make sure are covered. One is use in your portfolio. So can you, the copywriter, either use examples of the work? Can you put them on your website? Can you say that they're a client of yours? What are the rules and regulations around that? Some clients are fine with it. Some clients really don't like it. So it's something you want to talk about with them. If you hope to use them in your portfolio, it's important to make sure that you're all on the same page about that. And then the last thing, copywriters have, I think, almost a unique access to their clients' kind of inner workings of their business. You're often behind the scenes as they're preparing for launches. You're seeing their marketing plans. If you're helping them launch a new website, maybe you're seeing all of the strategy and things that are going into that. So it's very common for a business to want you to have a confidentiality term. This is sometimes called a non-disclosure agreement, but we can kind of bundle it into the client agreement. So if you have your own agreement that you're sending to potential clients, it's really nice to have that term in there. It gives them some confidence that you are not going to take any of their ideas, their secret sauce, the confidential information they're sharing with you and do anything with it, harm them, share things that you shouldn't be. So it's very, very helpful. And I think it's a good thing to include. All right, so we just went deep, deep, deep into your client services agreement, but I hope this has gotten your wheels turning about, I try to stay positive, but there are a lot of areas when you're doing client work, especially when there's a lot of money on the line, a lot of areas where things can go wrong. So, an ounce of prevention on the front end by having a really tight contract that you've talked about with the potential client so you both know what you're getting into, what you're agreeing to, can really, avoid a lot of problems before they ever pop up. All right, we're going to talk about 3 more essential legal protections for copywriters: your website, privacy policy, and terms and conditions. And then we're going to talk about when you start bringing on people to help you in your business. Maybe you get so busy you need help, which is a great problem to have. So let's talk about your website. Honestly, as a copywriter, in the beginning, you may not even have or need a website. You may just be doing awesome work and getting word of mouth referrals, which is amazing. But as maybe your profile is rising, maybe you decide you need a website. There's 2 essential legal documents that I recommend for your website. The first is actually required by law. You've heard me talk about it before, if you've listened to the podcast, and that is your privacy policy. So this is required by law. Please don't omit it. It is required for any website that collects any kind of personal information for visitors. So this is even if you have just a little sign up form for your newsletter, or if you have, a freebie or an incentive, maybe a downloadable guide or some templates that you give away for free if people give you their email address. That is personal information. So you need to have that privacy policy that tells people what are you going to do with that personal information they're submitting. It also includes if you have a contact us form. I know a lot of us now use forms to gather information from potential clients or people contacting us for various things. All of that is included in that personal information. So you got to have a privacy policy. I don't recommend just DIYing this or copying someone else. We have a great template for this on our contract template store. So go check that out at awbfirm.com if you need this. It'll take you about 20 minutes to get up and running. It is very easy. So that's the website privacy policy. You got to have it. The other thing that you may put on your website, it's not required, but I think it's a good idea, is your website terms and conditions. So this is kind of the contract between people who visit your website, so not necessarily your customers, but just anybody who lands on your website, and your business. So it lets them know what they can and can't do with your content. Maybe you've got beautiful images. Maybe you've got amazing blog posts or videos that you have posted on your website as free content to kind of build your reputation and show people you know what you're doing and showcase your writing skills. It lets people know what they can and can't do. Can they, print it out? Can they post it on a bulletin board? Can they share it with a friend? It kind of gives them the rules of the road. So those are your website terms and conditions. Not required, but it's a good idea. The last thing I want to touch on, and this is really essential once you start building your team. So again, I mentioned, hopefully you will find that you start getting busy and maybe you have some lower level work that you want to send out to someone else. Maybe you want to really focus on sales pages and you don't want to write emails anymore. Maybe you've got somebody who wants you to do social media posts. You're not as excited about that anymore. So you want to bring someone on. Or maybe you want to bring someone to do something totally different that you can't do at all. It can take lots of different forms. But once you start bringing people in to help you with your business, you need to be using an independent contractor agreement. Or sometimes if you're working with another business, we call this just a services agreement. It kind of looks the same. It just can be called different things. But so this is kind of like the client agreement we just talked about. It is outlining what each of you is going to do. It's going to outline any schedules. It's going to outline payment terms. And you probably are going to want to include a confidentiality term like we talked about. Again, you're kind of letting them behind the scenes of your business, and you probably don't want them using your confidential information. That could include like your customer lists. Maybe you don't want them contacting your clients and trying to solicit them, trying to, get them as their clients. So there's lots of different things that you may want to include in your contract agreement, depending on your relationship and how you're working together. But this is really important if the person you're bringing into your business as a contractor is actually working on your client work. You want to make really clear that you've got those intellectual property terms, because if you're promising to your clients that they're going to own all the rights in something, or that you're going to transfer all the rights of something, you need to make sure you actually have those rights from your contractors. So if person A owns the rights, contractor A, and they're working for your business, and your client wants to own all the rights and everything, you got to get those rights from contractor A. So we do that in our independent contractor agreement. Again, our default rule is that your contractor owns all of that stuff. So that's not how we want it to go if you're promising the client that you're going to give them all those rights. We want to make sure that you can actually deliver on what you've promised. Or even if you're just giving the client permission to use it, you've still got to have the rights from the contractor to grant them permission. Either way, we've got to make sure all the intellectual property is very clearly spelled out in all of our agreements. All right, you may have noticed I didn't talk about setting up an LLC. I didn't talk about taxes. I didn't talk about all of that. Those are all things that you may need to do down the road, but I will tell you, when I think about all of those kinds of legal protections, what we're really thinking about is the risk that your business could get sued, and that something could go wrong that would lead to your business being sued, and that the person suing you might want to come after your personal assets, your personal home, your personal car, your personal bank accounts. What an LLC or a corporation does, I like to say, it builds a fence around your business. So anything that goes wrong in the business, they can only get at the stuff that's inside that fence. They can't get at the personal car that's outside the fence. They can't get at the personal bank account that's outside of that fence. So when we think about a copywriter and we think about what could go wrong, the good news is there's really very few things that you could be sued for other than breaching a contract with a client, not doing a good job, not refunding money, or not delivering the services that you promised. Maybe violating someone else's intellectual property rights. So let's say you plagiarize, you borrow some copy from somebody else that wasn't yours. These are all things that are pretty preventable if you are doing a good job, if you're following the rules. So I don't worry so much about copywriting agencies being sued and about that liability protection. Now, as your business grows, as you're working with larger clients, as you're working on bigger projects, that conversation may change. Your risk level will change as your business grows. But I don't think in the very beginning that that's something you need to worry about on day one. Something to keep in the back of your mind. It might be something to think about, maybe you do an annual legal review. You sit down and think about, okay, have things changed? Am I a little bit more worried about this now? But I really want you to focus on your contracts first. I think it's very easy. We get distracted by some of these shiny objects like forming an LLC or registering a trademark, some of those things that seem a little more exciting than a boring contract. But all of the things that I went over at the beginning of this episode that could go wrong, those really are all very much bundled up with your contract and with your client relationships. So that's where I want you to focus. Down the line, you can listen to other episodes that I have about forming an LLC or a corporation. And that will, maybe come into play as your business grows. All right. I hope this has been helpful. As I mentioned, next week, Ashlyn Carter interview. Definitely come back for that. It is a good one, I will tell you. And if you have questions, if you are thinking that some of these templates might be a good fit for your business, feel free to reach out. We are on social media. The AWB Firm is on Facebook and Instagram. Feel free to shoot us a DM or send us an email. All that information is at our website at awbfirm.com. We're happy to make sure that you get the right contract that is a good fit for your business and actually is giving you the protection you need. So all of those links are in the show notes, and we'll put them below the video as well. Hope you have a great week, and I will talk to you guys soon.